Let's start with the League.
Of game?
Philosophers.
I'm pretty sure it's unscripted and unedited.
I heard it was unedited.
Yeah. Video game podcast?
That's the one. It's for you.
To enjoy.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, so here we are. We're both kind of tired. We both didn't sleep a whole lot, but we're showing up and we're recording and we're throwing it down and we're just gonna wing it. This is probably.
And we wore SNK clothes.
We did. See? Ow.
Fatal Fury. Yes. Okay.
Got my old school SNK shirt there.
Nice.
This is totally coincidental too.
Yeah, totally coincidental. We did not plan this. We're total twinsies, but we didn't plan it.
Totally. Yep. And so not the normal super what's the word I'm looking for?
Energetic, hyper.
Yes, all of those things. And maybe prepared, planned for researched podcast as normal. But that is totally fine.
Yeah.
I think this one is just kind of naturally more conversational.
Exactly.
Yeah. So before we jump into that though, what have you been playing, my friend? What's been on your plate?
Well, I've been really busy with projects, doing stuff downstairs in the game room, kind of redoing that and everything.
As you welcome a new member to the family?
I did. So I got a Super Neo 29 Type 2 candy cabinet, arcade cabinet. And it is awesome. But of course, the second day I had it, the monitor crapped out. So, but I purchased it full well knowing that the monitor had some issues prior and the chassis got fixed. So I was working with the seller and the seller's like, hey, let me pay for return shipping for the monitor chassis. If you can at least remove it, we can send it back to, there's a place out in California called P&L that does monitor repair for old shit. And they are the ones that originally repaired it. So it was still under warranty actually. So he's like, I'll pay for shipping to get that shipped back out there. And I'll pay for, And he goes, if there's any extra things that they need, any extra payments to fix the chassis, I'll cover that and then cover return shipping to you too. He's very apologetic about it. But other than that, the cab is in fantastic shape. There's not a spot of rust on it. There's not a dent on it, except for the little bit of the frame I had to bend back to get the monitor access door off.
Yeah.
But it still closes and it's so great. You can barely see it and it's in the back, so it's fine. But I'm really excited about it. It houses a Hyper Neo Geo 64, which of course has only 4 fighting games on it and 6 games total. So, sorry, 7 games total because there was two racing games.
Oh, there wasn't there? There was, what was it, Raging Driving? God,
Roads Rage or Roads Edge or something like that.
Yeah.
And then there was the Beastbuster game.
The light gun game, right?
Yeah. Did you ever play the original Beastbuster way back in the day, the 2D one that came out before the Neo Geo?
No. See,
it's really great.
I thought that the Neo Geo 64 was the initial one.
Nope.
And then the Neo Geo Pocket had an overhead kind of adventure-y kind of game that was I don't know, whatever. I played it though. I thought those were the only 2 entries. I didn't know that there was like a legacy game that was based off of.
Yeah, a light gun game that came out, I think it was either 1989 or 1990. It was one of the last releases SNK did before the Neo Geo launched. Wow. And it was a full light gun game. It's on the the SNK 40th anniversary collection on Switch.
Really?
Yeah.
I gotta look that up because that was kind of the golden era of light gun games too.
And it's cool looking, like it's really gory, like the pixel art is fantastic. Like it's a lot of fun. You definitely should check it out.
Ooh, yeah. Open up a tab to check that out later.
Speaking of gory and guns and things, of course, I've been on edge waiting for Resident Evil Village to come out this week.
Yeah, so you got to sink your teeth in. Did you jump in on Friday on release?
Is that a vampire pun?
It just turned out to be. Yeah.
No, I put in about 4 hours total so far. I only get to play it about a couple hours on Friday night and a couple hours last night after I got back from my parents.
Cool.
But so far it's fantastic. I know it's only like an 8 to 10 hour romp, which most Resident Evil games are 8 to 10 hours. So it's not too long, but so far it's just meaty. The pacing I feel is good. I read that there were some pacing issues, but I haven't run into any pacing issues yet. Everything feels like it's going along nicely. I think I was telling you the other day that the dev team really leaned into the creepy side of horror with this game in a way that there's not always horror being thrown in your face, but as you're like walking around, there's just a creepiness factor that I don't get when I play the modern Resident Evil 2 or when I got Resident Evil 7. Like, sure, everything's kind of, you know, creepy and gory and stuff, but there's just this like underlying twinge of even though things look right, you know, things aren't quite right and you can't place your finger on what's not right and creepy about it. They just did a really good job of like creating this atmosphere of creep that just permeates, especially if you're playing it, you know, in the dark with headphones on, with spatial sound and, you know, everything. I mean, if you're really trying to get the full Resident Evil experience, like the atmosphere in this game is probably it's right up there with the Resident Evil 2 remake from a different perspective, but the atmosphere is fantastic.
That's cool because that's, I would say, probably one of the hardest things to get down. Like there's many forms of horror and many ways to portray it. And the jump scare is probably like the cheapest, easiest, you know, kind of bang for your buck, but also probably the most overused. And something like that, getting that kind of creepy atmosphere, that unsettled feeling, I feel like that's almost the result of, you know, many little things all working in concert, from the art direction to the lighting, the staging of the situation. It makes me think of like one of my favorite like horror movies of all time, if you call it that exactly, is The Shining. And that is such an unsettling movie. And part of what really works in that movie that I found out way later after seeing it many times is that Kubrick filmed a lot of the shots so that they didn't work architecturally. For instance, if you consider the entire mansion, this like kind of square floor plan, the little boy Danny with the famous shots of him riding his tricycle big wheel kind of thing, he makes too many right turns as the movie progresses, and he takes impossible pathing later on as the movie, you know, gets creepier and creepier. And he continues doing things like that with the movie, where he creates these almost subconscious wrongness that shouldn't work, but they're so not obvious that you would never really think about them, but it just still, you know, in the back of your head registers as wrong, and it just creates this unsettling, you know, offness about it. And it sounds like the new Resident Evil is kind of dabbling a little in that territory, where it's much more important to create the set and setting than it is to create the grotesque thing that's gonna, you know, jump out and scare you.
Well, now I need to watch The Shining again with that knowledge.
It's cool,
But yeah, one of the creepiest things that I think grabbed the impact of until I actually started to interact with this character in the game, and I'm not spoiling anything here, the Lady Dimitrescu.
Right, the infamous 10 foot tall or whatever,
But I mean, in the game, she is just imposing as fuck. Like, she's scarier than Nemesis or any of the other like large things because she's elegant. Because she's a vampire kind of thing. Something. I don't know the whole story yet, but she's definitely a vampire. She drinks blood. She drank Ethan's blood at some point. But like, yeah, there's just the hugeness of her, and it's a woman too. So the hugeness of her, in contrast to other male characters and things like that, like you're just like, whoa, this is really creepy. And again, just leaning into that really creep factor. Like she's not scary, but she's creepy, and she does creepy to make you feel just crawly and awful. And there are a couple criticisms I can throw at the game, where things happen that I'm like, that seems just a little too supernatural for me. But then I'm like, but any other time Resident Evil has thrown in something that just seems a little too supernatural, there's always some sort of scientific explanation for it.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of things where I'm just like, no. That's a little too far fetched. But then that little voice in my head goes, nope. I guarantee you, a little bit later on down the story, you're going to understand why that happened, why that looked far fetched, and then you're going to go, oh, that totally makes sense, and you're totally fine with it. So yeah. I'm waiting for that moment for a couple of things, but outside of that, super impressed.
Cool.
Having a great time, and I'm playing on PS5, and it's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah,
sounds great.
Yeah, it's great.
One thing that we were both quite into in between the time from the last podcast is Espgaluda.
Yeah,
we both got pretty into that. And that actually ties a little bit with the topic. Today's topic being, just how much do you play a game? When do you know you've got enough? When is your fill the right fill? Which we'll get to. But we both just kind of got on this little kick because you got the actual board. I had spent a good amount of time playing the previous game, Esprade, or Esprade, on the Switch, and so we both dove into that one and just started pursuing like an 8 credit finish. And that was a nice little departure to jump into a shmup, and just kind of start playing it every day and just start making progress on it. And and then took a little bit of a break from that, and in anticipation of playing or talking about Treasure in the near future, I started playing some Alien Soldier. I don't want to talk about it too much because
don't say too much about it.
We've got a whole episode to talk about it, but as expected, I'm really digging it.
It's always thought you would once you got into it.
Sheesh. It's I've always been a big fan of Treasure, and I really, really liked Gunstar Heroes, and run and gun games have always just been a fun thing for me. And I don't know why I never got into this one. I bounced off of it a couple of times. Like I originally played it as a ROM, and I would try the first couple of levels, and it's honestly, it's kind of hard to get into because it's got a weird kind of jump, like lock into a double jump thing going on. The controls, there's just a lot going on as you figure out how to kind of pilot this character, and it's hard as balls. It has 2 difficulty modes. One is, which is the default of being super hard, and the other says super easy, but that is a bullshit.
It's not
lie.
Easy. No, it's not easy.
It is just like mildly less hard.
Right.
So I've been working my way through that though, and that's been totally fantastic. And then other than that, mostly just playing more Apex Legends. I've been getting really just into that game. At this point, I've got almost like 500 hours on it. It's quickly becoming one of my just favorite FPSs of all time.
Wow.
And I'm really getting into like the more advanced elements of that game, which is far more than just kind of, running around as a first person shooter and shooting. But there's a lot of like cool movement mechanics in that game, where the source engine that they used has a different way that it works with momentum, and that it calculates momentum based on essentially stacked movements. So you can, for instance, imagine you're in a gunfight with somebody else and you're kind of going from cover to cover. You can run, slide, and then jump, and all that momentum will stack together, which is one thing, and it's cool. But then you can take that momentum while you're in the air, now, with all of that velocity. And if you slowly move the mouse in the same direction as you strafe in the air, those 2 movements, the mouse movement and the strafe, then stack as well. So you're able to do these really crazy things like a run, slide, jump, and then hook and throw yourself into a wall, and then bounce off the wall, and then land, slide, and then keep going.
It sounds like Cyber Shadow.
Yeah, imagine.
We're gonna keep talking about Cyber Shadow.
Oh, I know. I think we have talked about it literally every single episode at this point.
Yeah, we totally have.
Yeah, and but I'm just having a ball doing all of this in a 3D environment on the fly within a battle royale, on top of everything else that's going on. So it kind of brings me back to one of my favorite feelings in a game is when you really lock in with the controls and it's all clicking, you feel like you're piloting something,
Yeah.
And I think first person shooters give me that feeling more than anything, especially because of course the perspective, and there's an element of like being superhuman that, like, you know, in real life I could never run, jump, slide, bounce off a wall,
Right.
360, throw a grenade, blah blah blah. But in the game you can. And what's cool is that in real life I certainly can tactically do that on the fly. Like the, you know, my mind can process it all, even if I could never physically do it. And
Sure.
this allows me to have this output, you know, to actually do all that stuff, which is pretty cool.
Fun.
Yeah. So that's been that's been mostly kind of my gaming time. I dipped into Control just a little bit, and I remember mentioning that to you. And I think I was just playing it way too impatiently. And
yeah, you have to be very, very careful and take your time with it.
Right, because I feel like I'm just like trying to, you know, I'm approaching it like some sort of buffet when it should be a slow, fine dining experience. So I still want to get into that, but I'm just kind of waiting until I'm in the mood to slow down just a little bit.
Sure, yeah, and I go on, you know, waves like that, you know, where a large single player game like that will be the perfect thing on the planet, or I just want to play arcade games, you know, quick hit and get my dopamine rush, and then I'm done, you know, after 4 credits. Or you for like Apex Legends, I'm sure that kind of fills that niche a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
Yeah.
Before we dive into our topic, I want to say about one more game that I've been playing. So here's a surprise. So every time that I get an order in from Japan, I'm like, you know, if I'm going to be paying for shipping, I may as well add a couple like fun things that aren't expensive, that aren't going to add any to the weight to the shipping much. And it's usually like in the form of a $5 or $10 import PS1 game that I've never played before, that I've always wanted to play.
Oh, cool.
And so 2 of the games that I got this last shipment, first one was G Darius. So the Darius games.
Yeah.
But G Darius, I think that's like the PlayStation era one. It got an arcade release, but I'd never played it before.
Okay, cool.
That's pretty cool. But the other game that I got is Super Adventure Rockman. Have you ever heard of that?
No. Super Adventure Rockman. That almost sounds like a Hudson Soft, like, you know, super God, what was the name of those games?
Adventure Island.
Yes. Yeah. Wait, so this is like a Mega Man game?
So I've known about this game since it came out, and it is a Mega Man FMV game that's on 3 discs.
I've never heard of this at all.
Yeah. And I think it's done by the same animation studio that did the animated cutscenes for Mega Man 8. I could be wrong. It looks very similar. Okay. And the voices are similar. So I know some of the same voice actors are in there from the Japanese version. But anyway, so it is a FMV game that has all these things that happen. And as the scenarios happen, you can make choices. Like yes, no, like you have some agency, I guess, in that.
Is it like choose your own adventure, or more like Dragon's Lair, Time Gale?
More like a choose your own adventure.
Okay.
Because you actually have like dialogue choices here and there.
Okay.
To making the thing. But when there's an action sequence that comes up, it switches to a first person view, and you have to move around a cursor on the screen and shoot the enemy or the boss master or whatever it is. And it's super easy and it's super dumb. And the animation is not great. and roll dies, and you're like, what the fuck? And so I got out my Mega Man encyclopedia, and even Keiji Inafune was like, I wish this game was never made. We had nothing to do with this game. I'm like, oh, this is the black sheep Mega Man. But I mean, it is really cool from just I'm a huge Mega Man nerd. So it is really cool to finally play this. I don't know really what's going on. Like I know just enough Japanese to figure out the basics, but not the details of what's going on with the stuff. But it is cool just to see anything Mega Man that's animated. And especially done in the original like Japanese style rather than, you know, the American animation, which was like, yeah, that's close, but it's not quite there. So I mean, it's neat from a fanboy standpoint, but there is nothing there for anyone else. Don't ever play it, but it has been a very interesting time to play this weird Japanese Mega Man choose your own adventure FMV thing.
And that's interesting because there's a certain appeal to when game developers try really weird stuff.
Yeah.
Like when they go way out of their wheelhouse. Like when you mentioned that the sparse battle scenes that are present are in like a first person kind of style.
Yeah, it's
Like I was like you've already got it right there. Like Mega Man is, one of the most perfect 2D platformers, and they skipped that in favor of just doubling down on the weirdness and going in this different direction.
yeah.
And like, yeah, I feel like most long-standing series usually have that black sheep, whether it be like Street Fighter the movie,
Did I
maybe
tell you that I got Street Fighter the movie, the game on Saturn? I got that too.
No.
I had that when I was a kid, and I have not played it probably since 1995.
Woo-wee.
And oh my god! So the Saturn version and the PlayStation version, same game, is actually different than the arcade version that came out.
Right, it was a little bit better, right? Like then they
Yeah,
improved some stuff.
They basically threw it on the Super Turbo engine with horrible digitized graphics. So it plays a lot like Super Turbo, oddly enough. I mean, you can do some really dumb bullshit things in it.
Yeah.
But it plays a lot better than the arcade version, and it's fun to bring out every once in a while. So you can, play with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Kylie Minogue, and this one guy with green makeup on and a orange wig for Blanca. It's so ugly. It's so choppy. It's so horrible. But man, it's one of those like kind of like Fighters History Dynamite, where you're like, this is a shit game, but God, this is kind of fun.
Yeah. There's something special that happens when you stop taking a game too seriously,
right?
And you just enjoy it for the spectacular catastrophe that it is.
Yeah. So leading into that, kind of using Espgaluda as our kickoff for what our topic is how long do we spend in games? Like when is enough?
Yeah.
And I kind of hit that wall with, I'm just going to call it Galuda by this point.
That's
so
easier.
What hit me with Galuda was once I got that 8 credit and then I got my 7 credit, I had put so much time and so much effort and spent so much time playing that game and obsessing over it over the course of like 2 weeks that I was just like, okay, I'm done. I'm not done with this game forever. I love the game. It's fan-fucking-tastic. One of the best shooters I've ever played.
Yeah, agreed.
But I think for right now, I'm good with my 8 credit accomplishment and knowing that, I didn't get that one CC, but at the same time, I've put more time and effort into this game than 90% of players that have probably ever tried it out.
Yeah, it's true.
Hit a cool milestone for me, because that's usually my milestone is for most shooters. If I can do it within $2 or 8 credits, that's my good point. Like that's when I'm like, I feel like I know this game well enough. I can come back to it. I can enjoy it in the future, because I don't often play games enough myself to ever master them. And I was watching this video or something. Maybe I was reading something. I can't remember. But the topic was very similar to this, in that how when do you consider a game finished? When you beat it, or when you've done everything there is to do? I think we were talking about that a little bit last time.
Yeah. And that I ran into kind of similar. And I think especially for a shmup, you have to set that kind of decision for yourself. It's not like an open world game where you're just going to get all of the achievements and fill out the encyclopedic list of quests, and then you'd have this sense of, oh, I finished the game. I literally did all of the things. A shmup is way more freeform. There's the initial survival challenge of just seeing how far you can get, through the game, and then eventually, if you can do the entire thing on 1 credit, that opens up, this whole scoring kind of chase, and the sky's the limit pretty much. I mean, there's plenty of shmups out there that still have active, I want to say bulletins. What am I
Caravan?
saying? Well, not quite, but just high score lists that people are all competing at, and it, speaking of Caravan, that's another great example. Caravan shooters are literally built as just a sandbox, just to see how much you can rack up. It's almost like it shares that element that pinball has with it. And yeah, it's kind of same feeling for me with Galuda is I knew I wanted to get the 8cc, and then I wanted to see if I could push it a little bit further. And I had a couple of really good runs, and was even able to beat the game in $1, which is probably the best I've ever done in a cave shooter. And then immediately the next day, had one of the worst runs and couldn't finish it within the 8 credits. And I found myself just kind of quickly getting burnt out on it. And this is that kind of balance that I feel like a modern, especially older gamer, we have to find and almost set those boundaries for ourselves.
Yeah.
You're balancing work, you're balancing life, you're balancing all of these new modern games you want to check out, as well as these older retro games that we want to dig into. And frankly, if I can't devote all of my attention to something, you know, I'm just going to kind of oscillate with it naturally. And it can be really frustrating. And I think it's actually a lot more fun to let yourself off the hook, that like, I don't have to 1cc this thing. You know what? And if I get to the point where I'm just kind of brain dead on it and I need a break to jump into something else, great. You know, and if I never even go back to the game, that's also okay. Like, I'm off the hook on that. Chances are I am going to go back, and chances are I'm going to have a ball with it, and all of my previously learned knowledge is going to come back, and it's just going to add and make the game even more rich and add depth to it the next time I visit it. But I don't feel guilty at all for lovingly putting that game aside. It's almost kind of like, you know, a thank you for your time, and I bid you adieu.
I feel that. And I often, like, you know, think about, you know, friends that we have that we've talked about before, like they'll get one game and they'll just like put thousands and thousands and thousands of hours into it. And I used to think like, oh man, that would be cool if like that were me, like, you know, really get into a game and really master the game. And the only games that I think I've ever take the time to try to master is a fighting game, because I can dial it down to 1 or 2 characters, you know, a little bit more focused. But for a game like, you know, like our friend Alex really gets into MMOs and played Dota for a million hours. He just told me last week he's got back into Dota. And I'm like, oh God, bye. But I mean, you know, those games are made to addict you and for you to sink just, you know, dozens of hours in clicking a mouse. And I'm not saying there's anything bad with that, but my I can't think of what I want to say here. My interests are so broad, and my love of video games as an art form is such that I want to try to experience as much as I can, because I want to see what developers are doing. I want to see what the games have to offer, things like that. And if I spend too much time with one game, I'm going to miss out on all these other things that I want to see. And like you said, you know, we have to, especially as adults, make time and set some boundaries for us. And that's, I think, why I focus so much on like arcade games, things like that, because I can explore those games quite fully, but it doesn't take, you know, 40, 50, 60, 70 hours to explore those games fully. You know?
And I think that speaks to what we're actually getting out of the games and how that's changed over the years. Like, as kids, you have your 1 or 2 NES games that you got for Christmas, and like, that was your bread and butter. That was all you had. And so you played Castlevania 3, you know, every single day for a year, and it was awesome. But especially as we got older and we became, dare I say, more of a connoisseur of gaming, and we were no longer primarily interested in beating games and replaying them and so forth, but we really became more interested in the game companies, the developers, the mechanics, the different engines that were being used, all of the creative game design that went into it. I feel like it's fair to say that those actually became the primary things that we were looking to consume. And in doing so, it makes playing the games a bit different. Now, all of a sudden, you know, maybe 5 hours with a game allows me to understand the mechanics, to play with it, and to really appreciate what's going on with the gameplay. But I no longer need to finish it exactly. because I want to make sure that I have the bandwidth to, get into all these other games that have really awesome things to offer as well in terms of gameplay and mechanics, even if I'm never going to finish them. And some you do, some really grab your attention and they got you the whole way through. But it's interesting because that's such a different thing compared to pretty much any other medium out there. Like anybody who makes a movie, for instance, can pretty much guarantee you're going to sit through to the very end. And they really have to stick the ending,
Yeah.
Video games different though, and I think that's why they have to be a little bit more upfront with everything that they have to offer.
I think there's a little bit of what people get into. It's called sunk cost bias.
Right. Yeah. And
a great example is I for those of you that don't know, I'm a learning and development educator in my day job, and I am one of the primary facilitators and designers for our unconscious bias program. And talking about bias with officers and things like that of a Fortune 500 company is pretty awesome.
Do you want to take just a moment though, just to say what unconscious bias is? Because I don't think a lot of people would know that term.
Yeah, for sure. So you have two types of biases. You have conscious biases, which you are aware of these things, right? You're aware of them before they come out. And you can think of like conscious biases as preferences. So I prefer to travel by land rather than by air for a litany of reasons, right? But unconscious biases, or implicit bias, as a lot of people know that as, are unconscious. You don't know they're there, and they often come out in your behavior. So rather than being conscious of them and making a conscious choice to do one thing or the other thing, the unconscious bias will just create a behavior that is going to have a negative or a positive consequence. So it's not the bias so much it's bad, it's the consequence of the bias and what that can bring out, right?
Yeah.
So there are over 180 different types of identified biases that humans operate under. And bias is just a function of our brains. So
I just had a image of like the silhouette within the cartoony Pokemon, and it's like, who's that Pokemon? It's like, who's that bias? Sorry, go on.
Bias is just a function of our brain to take shortcuts, or we would be overwhelmed all the time because everything is fighting for our attention. Like right now in this room, there's probably over 11 million separate pieces of information. And one of my colleagues can't wrap his head around that. And I'm like, listen, just because you're looking at some objects in the room, think about each of the individual colors, the texture, the lines, the way your voice is echoing. I'm like, you're not thinking large enough to the amount of stuff that we have to process every second of every day, and our brains just can't do it. So our brain takes shortcuts, and that's where biases come from, right? So a sunk cost bias is just a type of bias where you spend money or time or effort into something, and you're not getting a lot out of it, but you continue to do it because you're like, well, I already put all this time into it. So then you continue to do it, even though it's not productive for you, and it's probably holding you back in some other way, but you continue to engage in it because you're like, I spent all this money or I spent all this time, so I should definitely continue on this.
Yeah, a lot of bank accounts have been ruined in Vegas for that exact reason.
Yeah, exactly. And I had one of my partner's coworkers. I remember this when I think it was Anthem came out. Yeah. And he was so excited about Anthem. He got Anthem and all this stuff. And of course, we all know what happened with Anthem.
Poor child. Yeah.
But he would not stop playing it. And I asked him, I was like,
interesting.
Why are you playing this? And he's like, well, I spent $60 on it. I'm like, that's not worth 200 hours of your time.
It's not. It's not.
If you don't like the game, stop playing it and go get a new one. Trade it in. People do it all the time. You have a decent job, like go get a new game. Why keep playing a $60 game when you're hating your life? I don't get that. Yeah. Sorry, it was Fallout 76.
Oh yeah,
well, whatever.
Right. Yeah. Pretty much interchangeable. Yeah.
But I'm just like, why? And that's that sunk cost bias. Like some people just can't get over the amount of time or effort they spend into something. They're like, well, I've put this time in, so I've got to keep going with it. I've done this much. And I think open world games feed off of that. Because you start to do like all these little things, and especially for people that like checklists and stuff like that, open world games are amazing for. But like, oh, I just got one more thing to check off, one more thing to check off, one more thing to check off, one more thing to check off. Well, I've already put 45 hours into this and I haven't seen the ending yet, but I should probably go ahead and do all the side missions too, because I can platinum the game then. And even if you're not really enjoying yourself by that point, it kind of becomes like work. And that's the point where I stop. When a video game starts to feel like work, I'm like, done.
Now, interesting though, is like, how do you separate those two? Because I think you could make the argument that games like Cyber Ninja are really hard at times. Those games really bust your balls, and maybe create more frustration, require more time and study and slowing down and kind of banging your head up against the wall at times, which are all, I would say, typically negative traits associated with work. But in the right scenario, it can be enthralling. But in the wrong scenario, it can be just totally debilitating for your satisfaction and sense of fun with something. Do you think that all just comes down to like the individual, and them recognizing their bias and kind of drawing that line in the sand? Or is it somewhere in between? Or is that all on the game and its design to hold that responsibility?
I think it's probably a little bit of both, but probably more skewed toward the individual. We all like different things for different reasons, right? I don't like open world games typically because there's not a narrow enough scope and there's just too much to do and I get overwhelmed and everything starts to feel the same and repetitive. And once there's so much of that repetitiveness, some people really like that. But once there's so much of that for me, then I get bored with it. And I'm like, okay, I've seen everything the game has to do. Next thing, because again, I have such, wide ranging interest and I want to see everything. Yeah. If I start to get bored with something because I think there's too much choice, I get overwhelmed. But it could be boring, repetitive gameplay, like that PS4 game Days Gone. Like that is just the most by the numbers, boring open world game I've ever seen in my life. And it's getting a PC port. Why? Who knows? No one on PC asked for this. But I even felt the same way playing Horizon and Spider-Man. We've talked about Spider-Man a little bit on here. I just like, I get to the point with those games, usually about 12 hours in, where I'm just like, I'm done. Like I've seen everything the game can offer. I don't know if I really care about the story enough because for some reason for those games, I don't connect with the characters. I didn't connect with Aloy in Horizon at all. But that said, if I do get a good connection with the character, I can power through any game. So kind of like Geralt of Rivia in Witcher 3. 200 hours later, and I lost my original save. Won't go into that. So I've never picked the game back up. But I mean, I was so interested in him as a character, but also the writing was amazing. Every single side quest was interesting and meaningful and different. And it wasn't just me fetching something. And if I was fetching something, there was something weird and interesting along the way that I ran into. It was just one of those kind of like Super Metroid or something where you just get an accidental masterpiece and everything works together amazingly well. And it's not in a different genre or anything than some other like big budget AAA games, like pick your Grand Theft Auto or whatever. But those things can't hold my interest. But this did. And I'm like, what was it about it? Because it's in the open world genre. It has a lot of those tropes. But when it comes down to it, when I really dissect it, it's the character and the writing that really got me. The gameplay and the mechanics also, I really like the potion system. Once I put the game into hard mode and I was like, oh, I have to use my potions now. And I got into those systems and things like that. Like that was really cool. And the kind of prep you use before you go into battle, like open world games typically don't have really intricate battle systems. And I wouldn't say that The Witcher is deep like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry deep, but the potion system is. And that's the deep battle mechanics. And I think the same kind of visceral battle prep and preparedness itch that I got with Final Fantasy 12 and the Gambit system.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you don't control those battles. You set everyone up with gambits and let them have a free for all. And you're like, oh, whoa, this didn't work in this battle. So then you go back into the menu and you tweak that one gambit and that one thing to make it better the next time. And then you play it out. So you're constantly testing and constantly doing new things and trying to figure out new ways to approach those same situations. And I feel like a lot of open world games miss that. So I get bored with them, and I never feel like once I hit that boredom, I'm like, well, you know what? I've got 8 hours, I got 10 hours, I got 12 hours.
Yeah,
I'm good. I feel like I got my money's worth, you know?
Yeah, I got very much the same feeling playing Witcher, although I didn't get into it as much as you did. I also bounce off of open world games super fast. For me, I find it really distasteful to experience a game that has like artificial lengthening, when you can just tell there's just this like soy bread filler to them where there should be meat. And that to me is just kind of like, gross. As a developer, you chose to sacrifice a really good encapsulated game experience to try to draw it out and make a longer lasting thing. I don't like watered down beer. I don't like watered down food. I just don't like it. I am a person that would much rather have 3 excellent bites than, 100 oversaturated, gray tasting nothings.
Same.
And open world games they're just so bad about that. And I have just such little patience for it, especially as I get older and time is more of a commodity. And I've just been around the block and seen all this shit before. The opportunity for creating novel, interesting things when it comes to open world games is just, it's just almost not there. What was interesting though about Witcher is, I don't know how they did it, man, but like every single moment felt polished. It felt intentional. It felt engaging and worthwhile.
And unique.
Totally unique. Every single NPC just stood out in some interesting little way. It was really unbelievable how they did it all. And that's a big part of where I decide how into this game I am and how long I'm willing to play it. As long as that keeps up, you'll probably have my attention through the vast majority of it. But once it doesn't keep up, all of a sudden there's got to be something there for me to stick around for. A lot of action games, they don't have great stories, but the gameplay is usually so good that that's where 90% of the fun and engagement is actually coming from. So playing an action game, it kind of shifts what I want out of it and what I'm getting out of it. When do you know? When do you know that you're just done and good? I ask this because I found, especially in the last year or two, I will have this moment where for 3-4 days, I'm really into a new game, often like the new AAA hotness. And one day I know I turned it off and I just like, probably not going to admit it to myself, but I'm never going to play it again. Like I'm just done. It like something in my little heart of hearts just quit on the game. And now I don't get too frustrated about it. Previously I used to try to come back to it, and I it was almost like being in a relationship where I was like, oh, something's wrong with me. Like, I'm not showing up enough for this game, but anymore, I just find, at one point or another, sometimes like I just, the ghost is gone. Like I'm just not into it anymore. And that's fine. That's fine. Do you get that? Is that something that happens to you, or is it more of a logical, intellectual experience where you kind of decide on your own terms, like when you're done, or how does that pan out for you?
I think it's maybe a little bit more intellectual. So there's a couple things that will make me bounce off a game immediately. One, if I feel the game starts to waste my time. So for example, of course, I played through Final Fantasy 12 a long time ago on the PS2 when it came out. I played through the entire game. I ate it up. And so, I mean, really, that's one of the games that I have completed more of that game than most other games I've ever played. I just love it. I spent like 70 some odd hours with it.
Wow. Yeah.
So playing the recent Zodiac Age, I put about 24 hours into it, and I got to one point where you're in, I forget the one empire's like main city, and you have to go around and you have to talk to every single person in the city.
That.
And you have to find 9 individual people that are going to tell you a thing or give you. I'm like,
and if you're missing one or two, you're just going to.
I'm an almost 40-year-old adult. I do not have time to do that. I'm not doing it. And I bounced off the game. That was a year ago. I haven't touched it again.
Right.
And it was fun getting up to that point again. I had a great time, but I'm like, nope, wasting my time. I'm done.
Yeah.
The other thing that will do it is, again, if I start to feel bored with the game. A great example, I'm trying not to use open world games because I hate picking on open world games because there are some good ones that I really like. Infamous 2 is another one I really love. Anyway, Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night. That new Iga Castlevania or Metroidvania that came out
right. Yeah, I bounced off of that one too. Yeah, tell me about it. I'm curious.
So I bounced off of it right before the last boss. I didn't even bother beating the game. I had like maybe 5% of the thing left. I knew I was on my way to the last boss, and I remember turning it off, and I'm like, I don't think I'm going to come back to this. I am bored to fucking tears. Only because I've played Symphony of the Night. I've played that game through 20 times or more, a couple dozen times.
You played all the Metroidvanias from
all the
GBA
Metroidvanias.
Games. Yeah.
Bloodstained is, I mean, it really is Aria of Sorrow with a new coat of paint.
Yeah,
it is. And I played through Aria of Sorrow and Dawn of Sorrow, which are the same game basically, a million times too. So I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I know what's going to happen. I've seen the game. I enjoyed the art, and I enjoy that all these cool people that I liked when I was a kid came back together and made a new game.
Yeah.
But they also, and as much as I love retro styled games, there certainly wasn't anything new that they brought to the table. Nothing that tickled me or surprised me or delighted me. Kind of like thinking about, people be like, oh, well, you played The Messenger or Cyber Shadow or Shovel Knight and you loved it. That's because those games were retro styled, but they still did something to surprise me. Cyber Shadow has its amazing movement mechanic options.
Yeah.
That I've never played that in an 8-bit styled platformer like that with that kind of precision. Nuts. So much fun. Yeah. The Messenger, on top of the amazing platforming mechanics, it opened up into a goddamn Metroidvania at the end of the game. And you're like, I get to engage with these awesome mechanics and get to see new parts of the levels and get to experience this hysterical writing for longer. Awesome. I mean, I was all about it. Shovel Knight, again, a really clever game, cleverly written. All the it kind of felt like if you took Mega Man and DuckTales and taped them together.
Right.
And
it was. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. And you're like shoveling shit. And you're like, well, actually I can use this shovel as a weapon and it works. And and I'm shoveling shit and getting treasure. And so it felt a little different, but Bloodstained, it didn't. It was it was Aria of Sorrow with a new coat of paint. I appreciated that, and I'm glad that there are people that were able to take that. But I think some of those people that probably beat it and loved it have not spent the amount of time with Koga Igarashi Metroidvanias like I have already.
yeah, and I
just got bored.
Yep, yeah, and I don't think there's anything really to save that situation.
Right.
I think that's just kind of, this tea is for people who haven't grown up drinking all of these, base brands of tea or whatever that it's all built off of.
I'm glad they're there for them.
Yeah. But, I have this idea that I would personally love that I think would work better to solve this problem for more AAA kind of games and especially kind of open world games and whatnot. I would love if I had an option to play the base game as they wanted it to, Whether it's bloated or not, whether it's polished or not, here's, the game that's just basically presented to consumers. But then also give me a truncated version. Give me like a core experience. Like I can play the 40-hour version of, so-and-so game, or offer me a really cooked down 15-hour version that just gets rid of anything that is filler at all and allows me to experience the core of it, hits on all of the game dynamics and pieces and parts, but within a really tight, 10 to 15 hours. I think that would be awesome. I don't think it would ever really catch on because it's almost the opposite of like an arranged version or a remix, where they add the extra chapter and add all the extra stuff. But I want less. I really, really do. And, I don't think it's all that crazy because you now have a lot of gamers like ourselves that grew up gaming and now we have adult lives. And we probably would be much more likely to finish these epic 60-hour games, if there was like the 15, 20-hour truncated version.
There are actually a couple games that come to mind that do that.
Really?
What comes so first one that popped into my head is Spider-Man Miles Morales.
Okay.
Not nearly the amount of bloat as the original Spider-Man, which is what finally turned me off completely.
Yeah.
Twice I tried to play through the game and I stopped at the exact same spot because I just like, there's just too much bloat. There's just too much crap all over my map. I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And with Miles Morales, it's a much more focused adventure. Sure, it's still an open world game and there's still lots of side quests and stuff for you to do, but it doesn't seem as dire if you choose not to do them. And so, I was able to get through the main storyline in about 8-9 hours and still have a fantastic time with it. But I didn't do nearly any of the side missions. And you know what? I don't care because I was more focused on Miles and his story and, his coming of age as a Spider-Man and, all this stuff, like a really, really cool character. I love the game. I love what Insomniac did with it. I love the pacing and I love that it doesn't make you feel like you're missing out on something if you don't do all the side quest. So that's nice. Another game that I can think of is Square did this with both Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy 15, where they had the version that they put on the Switch and cell phones and things like that, which went through the entire story, but it took out all the open worldness from it.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And it kind of focused everything a little bit more. And it, doesn't have the amazing, beautiful, detailed graphics.
Yeah.
It used a more simplified graphic style that's still cute.
Right.
Still looks fine.
You still get that abridged kind of experience.
Yeah, but you get that abridged experience. So if you want to experience the story of Final Fantasy VII, but you don't want to experience the 60-hour adventure, have at it.
Nice.
And of course that's Square Enix, and they have a bajillion dollars to throw at shit like that, and most developers don't. But when we're talking about the Squares of the world or the Sonys of the world that are just throwing money behind these developers to make these things, to your point, there should be something that caters to the person that wants to experience the story but doesn't want to experience everything. And I don't think open world games are often balanced enough to let you do that.
Yeah, and until they are, I think we're just gonna have to set our own endings. We get to 15 hours and we say, well, Spider-Man decided, although there's a lot of people in need, he was done.
Yeah.
Or whatever it may be. And I feel like that takes an extra element of, I don't know what it would be. You almost have to be okay with not finishing it, to say, I'm fine leaving food on the plate,
Yeah.
I don't need to finish everything. I just want to try it and that's okay, I feel like that's extra hard for just Americans. It's just not in our culture to do that, That's anti-consumerism. It's necessary, like it's kind of necessary if you really want to experience all the games out there and you also don't want to feel shitty about it. Like, you gotta be okay with them.
I think it also goes with the approach that the person likes to take with the game. So like I said before, like I love experiencing the art, seeing the technology in these video games. So usually when I sit down and I play a new AAA, Uber game like Resident Evil 8, for example,
Yeah.
it's probably going to take me a longer time to beat it on my first playthrough because I'm walking around real slow. I told you, like, I love analog controls rather than keyboard and mouse, even for a lot of first person games, because
Yeah.
of the nuance of analog control.
Yeah.
You can creep.
You totally like changed my mind about that, because I am a big keyboard and mouse controller player when it comes to first person shooters.
Yeah.
I am a guy that spends a lot of time doing aim training and thinking about my muscle memory and my mechanics and stuff. And to play, for instance, like Cyberpunk, it seemed at first where it was just like, of course I'm going to play this on mouse and keyboard. But you were totally right, especially for a game like that.
Yeah.
Once I switched to controller and could actually just kind of literally walk through a room instead of having to run, or crouch walk as my
Right.
only two options,
Yeah.
it became so much more pleasing to navigate
Mm-hmm.
environments that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'll often take my time and just look around at shit, get really close to the
Mhm.
objects and see what the texture detail is and see what all those small little details that make up the world, that make it feel lived in and unique and not just like a static video game world, but makes it interesting. And what are all those little elements the developer put in again with like Resident Evil that make it feel creepy?
Yeah.
What are all those little things? And I watch so many other people play games, and even if I like tune into a let's play or something on YouTube, if I want to check out a game that I haven't played before, like one, I don't like watching those because they're people playing through are much more uh, uh, concerned with shock value and talking to their audience that they're really not paying attention to the game.
Right. Yeah.
But also like when I watch other people play games, they're just trying to rush through the game, or they're really trying to focus on objectives rather than just enjoying the game and the atmosphere and the world
Mhm.
that the developer has built. And that's not bad that they're not taking my perspective at all. It's just that's my perspective. That's what I want out of that game is I want to take my time and look
Yeah.
at all these little things and wow, what is in this little church? Why is this church creepy? What makes it creepy? Oh, it's all the weird candles and all the things and how they're placed. And there's so much art in there. And that really grabs me. And if that grabs me in a game, it's going to be really hard to pull me away from the game until
Right.
I find a spot that bores the crap out of me.
I find it so funny, satisfying, and ironic that game developers are often filling their games up with plenty of little things to do and to chase around, and they're leaving their trail of Reese Pieces to make sure that the player keeps nom 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 nom.
Yeah.
And here you are doing what they want, which is to spend more time with a game, to appreciate it, to get enthralled, to buy it, and you're not even following the candy. You're
Yeah.
looking at the walls and appreciating the design,
Mm-hmm.
which I know for a fact that there is some artist out there, some digital artist that probably painstakingly worked on, creating a mirror somewhere in some stage.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that 99% of the players run right by it and they don't even notice it. But I hope that person knows that you're out there slowly moving your camera up and checking it out,
Yeah.
and like really getting into it.
Mhm.
I hope all the digital artists out there hear hear what you just said and feel a little bit better, and they're like, oh fuck yeah, somebody's noticing all my work and appreciating it.
Yeah, for sure. I hope there is. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I hope there are some artists out there. Like when I I'm just gonna keep talking about Resident Evil. So when I went into finally got into the castle and I went into the main hall in the castle, which has this beautiful ornate staircase and everything is wood etched and it's just a
Ooh.
gorgeous fucking room. Like
Yeah.
I want to sit in there without the vampire ladies, but I would love to sit in there. Like I would love that to be my foyer, walk into my house and I'm in this beautiful foyer with this huge fireplace and a nice cozy couch. And
Sounds
so,
plush.
this little seat against the stairs and a table with some tea on it. And it's great, but it was so cool in that moment when I walked through there and I'm kind of walking around the room, getting lay of the land, vampire thing attacks me, whatever. But after I'm able to go back and I'm able to look around a little bit, I remember walking past just some posts when I went upstairs, there were just some posts, and I just walked past the post, and I was like, was there a face on that post? So I turned around and I was like, no shit, there's like a face, like 4 faces, like all around this like skinny post, and there's like 4 of them. And is that needed? No, that is not needed. But man, they did their research, and that kind of details there. And people, I don't think enough people pay attention to those little details and appreciate the atmosphere that the developer is trying to create. And I just, that really gets me my jollies, especially with all of these polygons and all this processing power nowadays.
Yeah.
You can do some cool shit. And like, I tried to watch, what was it? Star Wars, the Clone Wars series last night. Yeah. Because I've never watched that series. I've heard it's amazing.
You're talking about the CG animated one. Yeah. So that's another good example. I tried to watch that series too, and I got a little burnt out because there's just a lot of filler episodes. Apparently the way to do it is to look up like the essential episode lists and watch it. Like
that's in Disney Plus. Yeah.
It's like an abridged form, you know? Yeah.
But I tried to watch the first episode, and I was like, oh, holy shit.
Yeah, the graphics,
real-time graphics today look way better than CG from not even 10 years ago.
Yeah,
like that blows my mind. And the fact that I'm like playing Resident Evil on PlayStation 5, and when I get my Uber PC back with my RTX 3090, it's going to look even better. Yeah, you know, especially after modders get a hold of it and start AI upscaling all the textures and things like that. It's going to look even better. Yep. And but I mean, it's nuts, the amount of detail and small, minute detail. And that's another thing that bores me often about open world games, is that all the environments are so sparse and static and full of, you know, copy and pasted elements, and nothing feels unique and intentional. Even in your large, you know, Rockstar open world games, where you have bajillions and millions of dollars going into development, there's still a lot of that cut and paste, because the environment is just so large that you can't have the amount of minute detail that, you know, the Resident Evil team at Capcom put into RE7 and RE2 and RE8.
Yeah. Because
it's a much more smaller focused experience. And for me, as a person that appreciates art, it's a candy store of just really cool shit, and seeing how they sculpted this stuff and how each individual piece, and but you know, this one thing in this one room you're never going to see again in the game, but somebody made it, and they put it in there to add atmosphere, to make you feel creepy in that moment. And that is that pillow's purpose, you know, or whatever it is, you know. It's the only one in the game. And I love stuff like that. I know it's expensive to do, and when you're thinking open world, you can't do stuff like that. But for these more focused games, I love it. That really gets me my jollies, and I will stick with it because it's so interesting to me.
Yeah, and you know, one of the takeaways that I'm finding myself having from this conversation is that it's just really important to know what your jollies are, to know like really what does it for you. Because if you don't, you end up being one of those people suffering from like a sunken cost fallacy, and you're just kind of mindlessly consuming this media, not really knowing why. And if anything, you're harboring this, you know, lingering sense of negativity or guilt or whatnot. And maybe, you know, one of the takeaways for me is just that no matter how we consume the media, how long we play it, and where those boundaries are, as long as we're aware of what we get out of it, what we're investing into it, you know, in a know thysense kind of way, like that's probably the best North Star that we have, especially as, you know, games continue to get bigger and more unyieldly with their size and the time requirements.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree.
Well, my friend, I think we're just about out of time. We might even be running just a little bit over here.
Yeah. We're like an hour and 2 minutes.
Nice.
Like that.
Nice. We're getting a good intuitive sense for this.
Yeah, it's good. All right. Well,
maybe are we treasure maybe next time?
We'll try show. So here's the thing. So if anybody is actually watching this, so I was going to play Ikaruga as my treasure game, because I had recently acquired a Sega Naomi arcade board. And for whatever reason, then they Naomi died and I have to get a different one. So, well, it didn't die, but there were things that happened and we're not going to go into that here. Anyway, I don't have access to Ikaruga right now, but I do have access to other treasure games and I can get any other treasure game. So my question is, and I'll give it a week to see if anybody actually puts anything in the comments, if anybody actually watches this, what treasure game should Mike play? Chris says Alien Soldier. What treasure game should Mike play? So help me out, peeps. What should I play? Pick a treasure game. That's going to be my thing.
Awesome. All right.
Any console, doesn't matter. I'll figure out a way to play it, even if I don't have that console.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good, man.
Cool. Well, until next time, everybody, have a fantastic week.
All right. Bye, everybody.